Ideas that once seemed fit for the future
faster than a commercial airplane
are here. This week, we're looking at the future of transportation. We've come to Pittsburgh, a city on the cutting edge of testing self-driving cars.
There's been no conversation.
The concerns people have about their streets being a testing ground.
So how do we get people to change their behaviors and actually take the bus?
And we'll talk about how ideas like this are changing all the ways we travel. This is The Race. Welcome to The Race. I'm Chris Stewart. Tech companies are optimistic that self-driving cars will be a big part of the way that we travel in the future. And as multiple tech companies use Pittsburgh as a place to test their vehicles, there are people who have concerns about the roads being used as test tracks.
It is self-driven, it is all electric, it is shared.
This is the Cruise Origin.
It can see things that you won't see.
Last month, GM unveiled this 6-seat shuttle that doesn't have a steering wheel.
No doubt, what we've laid out here is ambitious.
The latest glimpse into what a self-driving future may look like.
You'll see them, in front of our particular office.
This kind of technology is a reality in the Steel City.
You'll see them come by every 20 or 30 minutes during the day.
That's hard to miss.
For the last 3 or 4 years, there have been many self-driving car companies that have been test driving on our roads.
5 groups are testing self-driving cars in Pittsburgh. Laura Wiens is the head of Pittsburghers for Public Transit.
I think with the broader public, there's been no conversation beyond the hype.
A grassroots organization questioning whether all of this is a good thing.
I think we should be very skeptical that a private company whose interests are for their bottom line are really in it to serve public needs.
Wiens says her team worked with University of Pittsburgh researchers to study information about self-driving cars. She thinks claims about autonomous vehicles being good for the economy, environment, and safer for pedestrians will be suspect for decades.
And the reality is that it's not going to do that until potentially 30 or 40 years down the road.
Critics point to what happened in Arizona in 2018, and Uber's self-driving car killing a pedestrian. Last year, our team took a ride with an executive with the self-driving car company Aptiv. He stands by self-driving as safe.
Part of why I'm in this job is because I'm a parent, right? So we're passionate about making the world around us safer, greener, and more connected.
Wiens says it is important as more companies test these rides, people have a voice.
The goal is really to equip communities to be able to meaningfully participate in the conversation about whether this stuff should be in their communities.
To decide if a high-tech future that might look like this is right for them. Americans spend about 70 billion hours a year in the car. That's actually 10% more than it was in 2014. Kai Beach is taking a look at how the state of America's roads impacts that number.
Pretty rough. Sometimes you feel like they laid it upside down instead of the right side up.
Whether from high in the sky or where the rubber meets the road, it's easy to see and clear to hear. Oklahoma drivers are dealing with rough roads.
You're having to dodge potholes almost as big as this truck here. Very dangerous. I mean, very dangerous.
For decades, Oklahoma has been ranked one of the worst in the country when it comes to road conditions.
All the way through the 90s and 2000, this was really an issue that had consumed us in terms of what do we do.
Terry Angiers with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. It says of the state's 33,000 lane miles of federal highway, 70% are in disrepair.
Also, the pavement is one of the worst pavements in the city area that we're going to take care of.
To help rebuild roads and ultimately keep drivers safe, ODOT was recently awarded about $800 million for projects, with equal amounts of money coming from state and federal funding. National numbers show Oklahoma isn't alone when it comes to states dealing with dangerous driving conditions. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, poor road conditions cost Americans their money and their lives. The ASCE's 2017 Infrastructure Report Card gave America's infrastructure system a grade of B+, saying 45% of the nation's highways are in poor condition. The ASCE also estimates that rough roads are likely a factor in almost 1/3 of all traffic fatalities, adding they also cost drivers $131 billion a year in extra vehicle repairs and operating cost. And now with more funding, leaders in Oklahoma are taking better care of the roads, with stats showing Oklahoma has gone from near worst to almost first.
And Oklahoma is really on the verge of a renaissance of improving a lot of its areas, and I believe transportation as the backbone has a lot to do with that.
Going forward, the ASCE says America must invest more in its infrastructure, and that delaying only escalates the cost and risk of our drivers and our economy. I'm Kai Beach reporting.
Rideshares like Uber and Lyft have revolutionized how Americans get around. Usher Qureshi has a look at what the future has in store.
Ride-hailing apps burst onto the streets a decade ago, tapping idle cars and drivers to shuttle passengers around, the hope making it easier to live without owning a car and take some vehicles off the road.
A lot of people get rid of their cars since Uber and Lyft come along. So less car for people.
But while car ownership may have dipped, initial data suggests transportation network companies like Lyft and Uber are actually making traffic congestion worse, particularly in the nation's 9 largest cities.
It's a lot of traffic all the time with all the cars on the street. So it's like, you have to really plan ahead.
For drivers like Erica Wilson, who gets stuck in gridlock on her drives to and from work, ride-sharing is a double-edged sword.
It's making a way for people to earn extra cash. So, I'm kind of in between. I don't want the hustle and bustle, but I do like the opportunity that it offers.
After conducting their own study, Uber and Lyft recently acknowledged they are generating more traffic in major U.S. cities than was first admitted. In Washington, D.C., the rideshare companies make up 7.2% of all vehicle miles traveled. In Boston, 8%. And in San Francisco, it's more than 13%. Here in Chicago, taxi cab medallions or licenses are limited to 7,000. At the same time, there are no caps on rideshare drivers, which have topped more than 66,000.
The rideshare companies are so powerful. They have a lot of money.
David Adenican has driven a cab for 8 years. He says Uber and Lyft have decimated the taxi industry.
It's tough. It's very, very tough. It's tough because, like I told you earlier, that the profit has been eroded by 50%.
But Dr. P.S. Sriraj, a research associate professor who studies public transportation systems, says ride-sharing has helped increase mobility and provided commuter access to transportation in less urban areas.
Are they contributing to more congestion, more emissions, and more delays? Initial results seem to be indicating that is the case, especially during the peak periods.
Sriraj says the data, however, is still spotty, and it's too early to determine what caps, if any, could help regulate the impact. Reporting for The Race, I'm Usher Qureshi.
More to come, stick with us. You're watching The Race.